What up, Space Fam? Goes in here from Anime Uproar, and I'm back at it again with a new Demon Slayer video. The topic of this video will be Zenitsu and whether or not he has already proven himself to be Hashira level, aka as strong as a Hashira through his exploits. We're going to be covering his battle against an Upper Moon, his face-off against Muzan, and much more, so make sure to stay tuned for this one. If you do enjoy seeing these Demon Slayer videos on the channel and want to keep them coming, you know what to do, channel the Slayer within and smash that like button with no mercy. Remember, smashing that like button is Demon Slayer energy and passing is scared Muzan energy, so choose wisely. If you haven't, make this the video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to turn on all notifications or you will miss future Demon Slayer videos and updates. And while you wait for the next Demon Slayer video to drop, feel free to check out my huge and growing Demon Slayer playlist that includes videos on all the Hashira, all Demon Moons, why everyone's afraid of Tanjiro, and much more. Link to that is in the description. And now, without further ado, let's jump into it, spoilers and all. So we won't go over every Zenitsu fight in detail because there is not much to say for the earlier ones. He pretty much faints, enters his unconscious avatar-like state, and wrecks the earlier opponents like the Tongue Demon and the Spider Brother Demon. It is noteworthy to mention that demons like the Spider Brother Demon do underestimate Zenitsu because he only knows one technique. This could have been a big issue for Zenitsu. After all, who would expect a guy who can't even master the other 5 thunder-breathing forms to ever be able to become a Hashira? However, his sensei encouraged him. He said, and I quote, "You managed to learn one, and that's something. It's more than I expected from you," end quote. I love how Zenitsu was such an underdog. His sensei didn't even expect him to master one. But I digress. Thunder Gramps continues, and I quote, "The thing is, if you can only do one thing, then do it superbly. Polish it to the utmost of the utmost," end quote. He wanted Zenitsu to be rid of all his impurities, so he put him through tough training and told him to become a blade that's stronger than anyone. I absolutely love how his sensei, aka Gramps, went from thinking he couldn't even master one form to believing he could be the best, and let's see if his prediction comes true. The point here is, someone isn't automatically better just because they know all the forms of a breath style. After all, Murata could know all the water forms, but he'd still lose in a fight against Zenitsu. Zenitsu shows what happens if you go deep rather than broad with your training. He's the embodiment of the Bruce Lee quote, "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. And in that sense, Zenitsu is worthy of being feared, perhaps more so than anyone else. Despite the poison in his system, his practice paid off and allowed him to finish the Spider Brother Demon. He finished him off using Thunder Breathing First Form 6-fold, which allowed him to use the first form 6 times in one uninterrupted combo attack. In that way, this one attack, since it's magnified 6 times, is almost like using 6 forms, except other Thunder style users probably couldn't move as fast and link up their attacks as quickly as Zenitsu could. This is the story's way of telling us that Zenitsu already compensated for his lack of forms by honing this one. And Zenitsu just continues to be more and more impressive as the story goes on. Zenitsu was really cool in the earlier fights, but his opponents weren't that strong, comparatively speaking. His first pretty strong opponent is Daki, the weaker part of Upper Moon 6. He's not strong enough yet to beat her on his own, so he double teams her with Inosuke throughout most of the fight. At first, they needed Tanjiro's help to get her head, but later, they do it without him. And this time, Zenitsu is the star rather than Inosuke. Near the end of the fight, Zenitsu suddenly pops out of the rubble. Daki thinks, and I quote, "I know what you've got. I've seen all your techniques. I know how fast they are," end quote. But then Zenitsu pulls out yet another improvement while still using the first form. He uses Thunder Breathing First Form, Thunderclap and Flash, Godspeed. Whenever you have the word God used in anime, it's hype and a big deal. Think about God level threats from One Punch Man. And Zenitsu's attack does not disappoint. As the name suggests, he significantly increased his speed. Daki, who thought she knew what to expect, can't help but think Zenitsu is so fast as she's quickly being dragged along with the attack. Zenitsu almost succeeds in cutting her himself with this attack, but her sash-like neck is just too flexible and bendy. If her neck didn't have that attribute, it would have already been over. There is a catch at this point that Zenitsu can only use Godspeed once and then his legs are shot, so he gets one go at it. But that really just makes the attack all the more hype. Luckily, Inosuke appears and helps Zenitsu finish Daki off before his legs become unusable and the Thunder Breather becomes helpless. So at this point, together they succeeded in beating a part of an Upper Moon, which even if it's the weaker part, is still pretty cool. The next big fight for Zenitsu comes a whole 50 chapters later, which is like a quarter of the entire story. But oh man, is this fight ever worth the wait. It is is Zenitsu's best fight. He's never been stronger, at least up to this point, and he's definitely never been cooler. In this fight, he takes on his old thunder-breathing senpai, who has now become Upper Moon 6 Kaigaku. Since their sensei planned for Zenitsu and Kaigaku to share the Thunder Hashira role, Kaigaku got furious since he thought he was so much better than Zenitsu, and gave in to the dark side when the opportunity presented itself. It's just the perfect setup for a battle. By himself, Zenitsu is fighting a demon-enhanced Thunder Breather, who also happens to be an Upper Moon, and who also happens to be his former senpai, whose descent into the dark side caused their sensei to take his own life. Thus, revenge is on the line as well, because Zenitsu loved his sensei like he was his biological grandpa, even calling him Gramps as mentioned. Another notable part about this fight is that Zenitsu doesn't show any signs of fear, and he's conscious throughout the fight. It really shows how far he's come from the crying, always passing out Zenitsu of the past. The trash talk between the two is great as well. Kaigaku says Zenitsu is still a shabby little weak runt. He asks him if he can use anything besides the first form. He tries to re-establish dynamic that they had when Kaigaku was stronger than him, but Zenitsu is not having it. He insults him back, saying, and I quote, "You seem thrilled to have reached the very bottom of the upper ranks through merely filling in blank positions," end quote. In other words, he's saying Kaigaku isn't really strong enough to be an Upper Moon, but got thrown in there to fill up the position. And there is some truth to that probably, but that aside, he is an official Upper Moon, and Zenitsu is about to take him on by himself. Before this, only Muichiro, the Mist Hashira, took out an Upper Moon by himself, Upper Moon 5 to be specific. And Muichiro is not only a Hashira, but Tengen singled him out as one of the most talented ones, along with Gyomei and Rengoku. Kaigaku seems amused at the fact that Zenitsu can talk back now, showing he's grown as a character and is not the same crybaby and pushover he was when they trained together. Zenitsu asks, why would someone poised to acquire thunder breathing become a demon? He's furious, screaming his grandpa killed himself because Kaigaku became a demon. He passed on alone by himself with no second person to make the process quicker and less painful. We get a flashback of when Zenitsu received the letter, and it was as expected during the Hashira training arc, when he all of a sudden gets serious and stops acting like his old self to Tanjiro's and our surprise. Zenitsu is crying and furious about the fact that their sensei purposely made himself suffer so much agony because the wielders of thunder breathing had produced a demon. At this point, the revenge aspect of this fight is set up pretty perfectly. Kaigaku reveals that he became a demon because he felt that no matter how hard he worked, their sensei didn't see his value. He wouldn't make him his Thunder Hashira successor. He was even more upset when their sensei suggested that Kaigaku be a joint successor with Zenitsu. You gotta hate this dude who turned to the dark side and completely abandoned his sensei who cared about him so much just because he didn't want to be a joint Thunder Hashira. Zenitsu calls pretty much himself and Kaigaku trash, and he feels sorry that his sensei, who he endearingly called Gramps, had such pathetic successors. He points out the fact that he could only learn the first form while Kaigaku could learn the rest, but not the first one, which is the foundation and arguably the most important. Again, just as when his sensei did it, Kaigaku is furious at being lumped together with Zenitsu, thinking he's so superior. The fight starts, and obviously I'm rooting for my boy Zenitsu, but I gotta point out that the demon enhanced thunder breathing looks very cool. It produces actual black lightning, something that I thought was really cool since I saw it in Naruto so many years ago. The coolness of black lightning aside though, now you might think, well, they were sort of tied according to their sensei, and perhaps Kaigaku was even a bit in the lead back in the day. So with his demon enhancements, Kaigaku should wreck Zenitsu. But that's what makes this fight so great and inspirational. Despite giving into the dark side so he could improve his speed, power, and versatility, he still doesn't dominate the fight. Keep in mind also, demon slayers don't actually produce their elements in reality, but demon enhanced breath style users like Kaigaku can actually do it through their blood demon art. So again, Zenitsu is actually fighting literal black lightning that electrifies and burns, as we'll get into. Still, when Kaigaku goes to attack, Zenitsu dodges and even calls Kaigaku too slow. It's so awesome seeing these arrogant Zenitsu moments because they contrast his usual character so much. And keep in mind, Thunder Breathers are already super fast, and Kaigaku gained further speed through becoming a demon, and yet our boy is still calling him too slow. After he actually calls him slow, it's revealed that not only was he fast enough to dodge Kaigaku's attack, he even delivered a cut to the upper moon without the demon noticing. I love these moments where a move is so fast it takes a while to take effect. We then get a flashback of Kokushibo telling Kaigaku that it doesn't matter what he does. What's important is that he lives on, so that there's the possibility that he could win someday. Nothing is shameful according to him, including becoming a demon. He asks if Kaigaku wants to become a demon for greater strength, and Kaigaku agrees. He takes a great deal of Muzan's blood, an important detail, since that's what's required to turn someone who can use breathing techniques into a demon. And as we know, more Muzan blood usually equals stronger demon. Kaigaku thinks that compared to the fear Kokushibo instilled in him, Zenitsu is nothing, but the mangaka does, interestingly enough, choose to illustrate Zenitsu in a cool way with whited out eyes. This usually happens with Yoriichi and Tanjiro when a demon is intimidated by them, so the fact that Zenitsu has become a character that similarly intimidates demons like the other two is very notable. Despite clearly being intimidated by Zenitsu, Kaigaku tries to calm himself by saying Zenitsu is worthless, always sobbing without any dignity or perseverance. Again, he's enraged at the thought that, to quote him, the rotten old man said Zenitsu and Kaigaku would be successors together. He is so averse to thinking of Zenitsu as being his equal, so the fact that non-demon Zenitsu seems to be beating and taunting him so far must really irritate him. Kaigaku is far from finished though, and he launches another attack which is composed of 5 successive attacks in one breath and in the blink of an eye. This actually does cut Zenitsu's cheeks, and Zenitsu can tell that Kaigaku has already eaten so many people to gain this much power. The attacks continue. Kaigaku is using every other thunder breathing form except the first one and combining it with his black lightning blood demon art. Zenitsu notices that Kaigaku's sword doesn't need to connect. Kaigaku can launch waveform attacks in the form of black lightning that can hurt his target. I hate Kaigaku, but again I have to admit, it's very cool to be able to actually summon your element like this in battle. After a while, Kaigaku asks Zenitsu, and I quote, "How's the sharpness of my blade infused with blood demon art? An attack that slashes and burns the flesh," end quote. He continues to land attacks on Zenitsu. Our boy is all cut up. We're further told that any slashing attacks that Kaigaku's victims take will continue to rend, aka tear apart their flesh. His power burns into the eyes and body. He says he became a demon and surpassed thunder breathing. He thinks he's won now, as a very injured Zenitsu is seemingly free falling to his end. Kaigaku insists that he's special. He's different from Zenitsu. He's not like Zenitsu at all. Zenitsu recalls back in the day when his Gramps told him to learn from Kaigaku's example, again reminding us of how Kaigaku actually used to be ahead of and stronger than Zenitsu, even before he turned into an upper moon. Zenitsu recalls how he used to look up to Kaigaku and how Kaigaku was special to him and Gramps. He has to come to terms with finishing off a dude who he once thought of as a brother. And he finally does, apologizing to his Gramps and saying that his and Kaigaku's paths diverged. Because of this section here, I feel like Zenitsu could have actually finished the battle off sooner if he was as ruthless as Kaigaku, but he probably needed some time to build up enough conviction to finally finish off his old senpai. Keep in mind, before Tanjiro and the others, Zenitsu pretty much just had his Gramps and Kaigaku, and now that his Gramps is gone, Kaigaku is the last tied to that simpler time when his Gramps and senpai were the only special people in his life. But as I mentioned, Zenitsu makes up his mind here and prepares his final attack. His face is tearing apart from Kaigaku's attacks that continue to tear apart the body like poison, or even worse than poison, long after the initial attack was received. Zenitsu apologizes to Kaigaku and then unleashes the 7th form of thunder breathing, Honoi Kazuchi no Kami, aka thunder breathing flaming thunder god. This is by far the coolest thunder breathing form we've seen yet, and cooler still, Zenitsu created it. Yes, the dude who couldn't even learn the 5 other forms turned out to be skilled enough to create a brand new one. As with his Godspeed move, it contains the word God in it, again to connote how powerful it is, and it even takes the form of a lightning dragon, often considered the strongest mythical beast in the animal kingdom. I went into how breath styles that take the forms of dragons in the Demon Slayer story, like sun breathing, water breathing, flame breathing, and thunder breathing, are especially strong in my 16 breath styles ranked from weakest to strongest video, and that's why I think it's all the more significant here that Zenitsu's attack looks like a lightning dragon. In Demon Slayer, the original and strongest breath aka the Breath of the Sun, has a move called Dragon Sun Halo Head Dance that similarly takes the form of a dragon. So combine the fact that a dragon is associated with the strongest breath style, with the fact that dragons are considered to be the strongest creatures, so strong they don't even exist, and yeah, you can see that the mangaka is pointing to this being a very powerful move. It's not a stretch to say this must be the strongest thunder breathing form ever created, and it came from our very own crybaby underdog, Zenitsu. The move cuts off Kaigaku's demon head, and as further praise for the technique, Kaigaku thinks to himself that he didn't even see it because it was so fast. Take that in. It was so fast that a thunder-breathing upper moon couldn't even see it, and it was powerful enough to take his head in one go as well. As he's about to pass on, Kaigaku is furious, thinking the old man taught Zenitsu something that he never taught him. He thought their sensei was playing favorites after all. However, Zenitsu says no, he wasn't that kind of person. Zenitsu reveals that this was in fact his own form. He created it so he could fight as an equal with Kaigaku. Ironically, despite how much Kaigaku hated the implication that he and Zenitsu were equal in power because he thought he was so much superior, Zenitsu is the one who actually shows his superiority in this fight. Not just that, he proved that he was superior without needing to get a demon upgrade. Now, although I always like hyping up Zenitsu, it must be noted that Zenitsu passed out after beating Kaigaku. He's falling to his death, and Kaigaku is glad to see it. He thinks at least Zenitsu didn't beat him, at least it will be a tie. But Yushiro comes and saves Zenitsu while also rubbing it in Kaigaku's upper moon face. He tells Kaigaku someone who never gives to others will someday become unable to receive anything from them. Only wanting is in the end the same as having nothing. After his words, he lets Kaigaku know it's a pity to die alone and then pieces out with Zenitsu, who did win and was saved because he was nice to others, gave to others, and thus had friends, unlike Kaigaku. Zenitsu has a brief moment as he's passed out where he sees his Gramps on the other side of a river, the one probably separating the living from the dead. He apologizes to his Gramps for everything, saying he wanted to become a Hashira when his Gramps was still alive. But his Gramps isn't angry at all at Zenitsu. He just cries tears of joy and says he's proud of him. I mean, I'm almost tearing up reading this section. But let's just take a second to realize that making a former Hashira proud is not an easy task, and it's a great moment for Zenitsu's character, where he pretty much lived up or even surpassed his sensei's high expectations of him. As he's treating Zenitsu, Yushiro goes on to say that Kaigaku's slashes on Zenitsu's face will open up all the way to Zenitsu's eyes if not treated. He has to use an agent that stops the advance of Blood Demon art developed by Tamayo to save Zenitsu. He goes on to say to Zenitsu that Kaigaku still hadn't mastered his techniques and abilities, which is lucky. If the fight had been 1 year later, Kaigaku probably would have killed him immediately. Whether this is true or not, Zenitsu's performance against an upper moon was very impressive here. But if you look at the fact that Zenitsu could have died if he wasn't saved by Yushiro, and you look at Yushiro's words about Kaigaku being able to crush him 1 year later, then it makes Zenitsu look somewhat less strong. However, I will note that, as mentioned, it does seem like Zenitsu was holding back his finishing move until he made peace with ending Kaigaku's demon life, which, if that's the case, means he probably could have finished him off sooner before taking on so much more damage. Damage that only grew worse as each wound continued to spread over the whole body during the course of the battle. Furthermore, Yushiro said probably, not certainly, suggesting he's not even positive. And in our boy's defense, he's been progressing super fast, and chances are he'd be much stronger in a year as well. Kaigaku wouldn't be the only one growing in power. So yeah, Zenitsu was already impressive, becoming the second person to solo an upper moon, and arguably he could have finished him off even sooner if he wasn't struggling with the whole facing his senpai/brother thing. Now, the conditions for becoming a Hashira are as follows. According to the Kyojuro Rengoku Side Story Part 1, one is to be at least a Kinoe, aka the highest of the 10 ranks in the core, and exterminate over 50 demons, or to defeat one of the 12 demon moons. Meaning, it could even be a lower moon. Since Zenitsu soloed an upper moon here, he should definitely qualify for a promotion to Hashira at this point in the story, and that's even if there weren't a shortage in the number of Hashira they already had. But since there is a huge shortage at the end of the story, if the team failed to defeat Muzan and the Slayer Corps had to go on existing, Zenitsu would most definitely be promoted in name as well because he more than met the criteria. Thus, at this point, it's not debatable, we can already refer to Zenitsu as a Hashira in spirit and qualification, and I love the fact that he got to see his grandpa's spirit after he succeeded in reaching this level, since he always wanted his Gramps to see him become a Hashira. Now, even if he did nothing else in the story, he already proved himself to be Hashira level. However, he does go go on to do even more. In fact, our boy even faces Muzan, albeit along with a bunch of other demon slayers. Yes, he gets taken out by Muzan for a while and multiple times, but as usual, our Thunder Boy gets back up eventually. In fact, Muzan can hardly believe how many times he keeps getting back up. It's amazing that the dude who started out as a crybaby scared enough of weak demons to faint on the spot has become a guy who will consciously keep getting up again and again to face the strongest demon. He uses Godspeed against Muzan and even 7th form Flaming Thunder God, and the attack noticeably hurts Muzan. However, Zenitsu suggests that the cut was too shallow, and only a bright red blade can do enough damage. So yeah, Zenitsu is not as much of a star in this fight as Tanjiro, which makes sense since Tanjiro is the protagonist, but like everyone else, he plays his invaluable role. And even after he thinks his legs are shot and he won't be able to move, he channels his Gramps' memory, his eyes go all white, and we see him again launch another thunderclap and flash. He continues to be hard on himself though, ironically calling himself too slow, and usually he would have been out of commission ages ago, but he keeps going, showing how much stronger he's become. He unleashes Godspeed, thunderclap and flash again, dragging Muzan along with his strong fast move that cuts through the ground itself. Then Tanjiro continues where Zenitsu left off, and thanks to Zenitsu's help, succeeds in pinning Muzan to the wall. This pinning becomes the definitive moment that leads to Muzan's defeat, so it's cool that Zenitsu is largely to thank for Tanjiro being able to pull it off. Muzan remains pinned as the sun comes out. He then turns into a giant demon baby, and despite his attempt to escape, the sun ends up finishing him off. Notably, the Hashira play a big role in making sure big giant baby Muzan doesn't escape. Muzan is defeated, a bunch of Hashira pass on, and you think the threat is over, but then it's revealed that Muzan turned Tanjiro into the next, more powerful Demon King. After multiple uses of Godspeed and other attacks including Flaming Thunder God, along with taking repeated damage from Muzan himself, Zenitsu is still alive to help deal with this Demon King Tanjiro threat. Admittedly, he's not in fighting shape, but he's up and even goes to hug Tanjiro, trying to get him to remember who he is and to not attack Nezuko. He's sent flying back by one of Tanjiro's attacks, however he's still not done and continues to scream for Nezuko, and he continues to beg Tanjiro to stop this madness. Thanks to Kanao, who delivers the medicine, they succeed in turning Tanjiro back into a human. And after the demon fighting is finally over, Zenitsu is okay, promising Nezuko that he'll make Tanjiro pay his whole life for what he did to him and to his wife Nezuko. It's impressive to see that Zenitsu can walk after some rest and even has enough energy to get jealous when Sanemi pats Nezuko on the head. Unlike Tanjiro, who loses the use of one eye and arm, Zenitsu could potentially, from what we've seen, go on to be stronger than ever. He hasn't been nerfed at all from what we can tell. And if there was a need, he would definitely go on to become a Hashira, and not just any Hashira, but the Thunder God Hashira. I say this because the word God has only been associated so much with Zenitsu's thunder attacks and with no other thunder breather. And you can argue that he surpassed the rest too by creating the strongest thunder breathing form yet, that takes the form of a dragon and is fast enough that even a demon enhanced talented thunder breather can't see it, let alone react in time to avoid it. Now it should be said, in the extended ending, while Tanjiro was forcing them to visit all the graves of the fallen for 3 days, Zenitsu started crying about his painful legs and Nezuko carried him on her shoulders. But I believe this would have eventually passed, just as it did after he uses Godspeed against Daki. So yeah, Zenitsu is arguably the strongest of our trio after Tanjiro got nerfed. But more importantly for him, he gets to fulfill his dream of marrying Nezuko, which I'm sure means way more to him than any amount of power ever could. And they even have kids together. I gotta say, it's a perfect ending for our boy Zenitsu. And I also have to say, Iguro is probably my favorite Hashira, Akaza is my favorite demon, but Zenitsu is my favorite main character. We won't count Yoriichi since he's long gone by the beginning of the series, but Zenitsu is just amazing, and his journey from crybaby to thunder god hero facing down the Demon King is inspirational beyond words. And that is it for Zenitsu, who in fact not only deserved to be a Hashira, but is arguably the strongest Thunder Hashira in history, and used his own created form to solo an Upper Moon who claimed he surpassed Thunder thunder breathing itself. Keep in mind, Zenitsu didn't even awaken his Demon Slayer mark, probably because the mangaka didn't want us to worry about Zenitsu not living past 25 years old like the other marked ones. But if he did awaken his Demon Slayer mark, obtained the bright red blade, and got all the other power-ups, he may well have surpassed every surviving character after the defeat of Muzan. And remember, Tundra has been nerfed, so it wasn't necessary, but if it had been, Zenitsu really might have been capable of becoming the strongest as his Gramps told him to. And if we look at it in the sense that his Gramps was telling him to become the strongest user of thunder breathing, then he did in fact succeed. And yes, to some, I may be overhyping Zenitsu, but I'd rather overhype him than underhype him, especially considering the fact that he started out as a crybaby and the biggest underdog in the series, to the point where his sensei didn't even expect him to pull off one form at first. Even Murata learned more water breathing forms than that. If you did enjoy this video and want to keep them coming, channel the Thunder God Hashira within and smash that like button with no mercy. Remember, smashing that like button is boss Zenitsu energy and passing is scared Muzan energy, so choose wisely. If you haven't, make this the video you subscribe and hit that notification bell to turn on, you guessed it, all notifications, or you will miss future Demon Slayer videos and updates. And while you wait for the next Demon Slayer video to drop, feel free to check out my huge and growing Demon Slayer playlist that includes videos on all the Hashira, all Demon Moons, why everyone is afraid of Tanjiro, and much more. Link to that is in the description. Leave suggestions for video topics you are burning up to see that you couldn't find in the playlist. And until next time, see ya, Space Cowboys.